Rightio, let's talk about some more common mods. Nah, kid, but it is a very common mod. First off, I'll apologise for the audio if anything goes wrong, just because it's currently storming and it's raining on and off, and the audio is going a bit odd. But yeah, today we're going to talk about turbos. More specifically, just the Oz delivered turbos, and then next week we'll dive into the JDM and possible aftermarket turbos. But yeah, so this week I'm going to try to start from the smallest and go to the largest and give you a rough idea of what they came on and what they were good for. So first off the bat, we have the VF32 and the VF33. These were off the Australian delivered twin turbo B4s. So they were pretty small turbos. The cars drove all right, but they did have a valley of death in between the turbos where boost would just drop off, and if you got caught in there, it was worse than driving a naturally aspirated car. The next turbo we can talk about is the TFO 35, which came on the early model Foresters, so the SF5s and such. And again, these were a fairly small turbo. These were smaller than the next turbo, obviously, but this turbo and the previous two, the VF32 and VF33, were really common turbos for the mirror owners to buy. So little 1 litre or smaller cars, people would buy them and put them on them to obviously turbocharge the cars, and they ran amazingly. Next we have the VF12, which came on the RS Liberties, so the early model Liberties. Next we have the TD04L, which came on the GC8s and the GDs, all the way up to 2007, I believe, and then we changed the turbo. But the TD04 came in a few different styles. So in the early models, along with the VF12 and the TD05 16G, which I'm going to mention next, had right angle inlets to the turbo. So whereas most turbos on Subarus are just straight into the turbine, the earlier models had a right angle where it dropped down and then went in. This was just the early model RS Liberty thing and a very early GC8 thing. It's something that you need to know. I think it changed around the 97 model and it went to the normal straight in turbos. But the TD05 16G, which in my eyes was a great turbo, and then Subaru decided to scratch it. Most people say it's for emission reasons because it is a bigger turbo than TD04. It came on amazingly, and it's just a great turbo. It's what the Evos use as well. But yeah, so this came on the early, so version 1, 2, and 3 WRXs, and also a few RS Liberties. Not all of them. Most of them had either the VF12 or I think it was the VF10 on the JDM ones, but I'll go into that next week. But next we have some STI turbos. So the version 5 and the version 6 STIs came with either a VF28 or a VF29. These were, again, a smaller turbo, but the VF28s weren't too bad. They spooled up very quick, but ran out of puff higher into the boost range. Next we have, for the version 7, 8, and I believe 9, we had the VF35, which was a very small turbo and very punchy, but again ran out of puff a bit higher up in the RPMs. I think it's a great upgrade for the TD04s, just because it's not really putting any extra strain onto the motor. So it's not a turbo that's going to max out your motor and blow it up, whereas some of the ones coming could possibly do. But the other thing I forgot to mention is the TD04s were also a great upgrade for the Foresters. So the next few turbos I don't know too much about, but I'm just going to touch on them because I've come across them before and it's something people should know. So we have the VF46, the VF52, the VF38, and the TD04Z. So with these ones though, the VF46 and VF52 were both single scroll. So again, your standard up pipes were used for these models, but the difference was the compressor housing. So instead of the inlet being 90 degrees, it was still the usual typical straight through model, but where it mounted to the intercooler changed to a 90 degree, and you ended up bolting the intercooler to them. So the other two, the VF38 and the TD04Z, were both for the Liberties. The VF38 was for the automatic model Liberties, the pre-facelift models. So these had a twin scroll setup instead of the single scroll. Same as the TO4Z, which was for the manual variant. It was also twin scroll and the same style as the VF46 and 52, where the intercooler bolts to the turbo instead of having pipes connect them. And then the VF43 and the VF48. The VF43, I believe, came on the 07 model WRX. So it was, again, the original style, straight through into the turbo and just straight out the side. And the VF48 came on the STIs. So pretty much the 08 plus STIs had the VF48. Yeah, the VF48 shared the old style where it would just go straight sideways into pipes to connect to the intercooler instead of the same as the WRXs where they used the bolts. So the VF48 and VF43 were great upgrades for TD04s as well, but the issue with these two, they tended to push a little bit more power. The VF43 not as much, but the VF48, I believe it was a ball bearing or something very close to a ball bearing turbo, so it spooled up extremely well. And these two are also a modern variant of two turbos that I'll mention next week, which are probably the two most common and most spoken about turbos for a Subaru, which are the VF30 and the VF34. But again, I will go into those two more in depth next week. But yeah, so out of all these different turbos, my personal favorite is the VF48. But yeah, so I had a VF48 that was running 25 pounder boost around 3000 RPM, and it spat the dummy in a very, very large way. When we go into it next week, it is a great replacement for the VF34, which again everyone knows about. But yeah guys, if you've enjoyed this video, make sure you give us a like, comment or subscribe, and remember to join us on Thursdays at 7:30 PM over on 3P Garage Live on Facebook, Twitch and YouTube, where we talk Subarus and pretty much whatever else I feel like talking about that day. It gets a little bit out of control sometimes, but yeah, hope to see you next time. See yous.
So this isn't how I normally end the videos, but I thought I probably should end with an apology. I just realised I said the next turbo quite a lot then. I should have used some imagination and changed it up a bit. So an apology here. Have a funny meme for the VF35s.